How are you today? So today's discussion will be about cognitive semantics, and here I have two different references which are from Lobner's book and also from Rambaud's book. So let's move on to the discussion. Okay, we will discuss first about the cognitive semantics in Lobner's book. In a very general sense, cognitive semantics can be used as a general term for any semantic approach that adopts this perspective on meaning and reference. And the range of cognitive semantics is smaller than the range of cognitive science because the categories and concepts that can be expressed by words in cognitive semantics are only a subcategory of the categories and concepts form our cognitive systems. Okay, that's what Lobner says about cognitive semantics. So, next we will discuss more about Rambaud's perspective in cognitive semantics. In Rambaud's perspective, cognitive semantics discuss more about the different ways in which human beings try to categorize and thus understand the world around them. It also deals on how all of this affect the way we understand meaning. And Rambaud states that this approach is called as meaning cognitive because it has deep roots in cognitive psychology. Rambaud also discuss about the relationship between linguistic knowledge and cognition, where there is no separation of linguistic knowledge from general thinking, which actually it is opposing the idea of the influential views like Chomsky and Fodor, who see linguistic behavior as another separate part of the general cognitive abilities which allow learning and reasoning. Besides, the relation between formal and functional approaches to generative grammar is associated with the idea that knowledge of linguistic structures and forms module of other mental process of attention, memory, and reasoning. Besides, cognitive linguistics does not differentiate between linguistic knowledge and encyclopedic real-world knowledge. From an extreme point of view, the explanation of grammatical patterns cannot be given in terms of abstract syntactic principles. However, it is only in terms of the speaker's intended meaning in particular context of language use. It also deals about the rejection of objective semantics, as described by Lakoff, is another defining characteristic of cognitive semantics. He calls doctrine the theory of truth conditional meaning and the theory of truth which holds that truth consists of the correspondence between symbols and states of affairs in the world. And Lakoff also rejects the objective reference, which holds that there is an objectively correct way to associate symbols with things in the world. Besides, there is also a term called experientialism, which is an alternative within cognitive linguistic framework, which maintains that words and language have meaning only because of our interaction with the world, and meaning is embodied and does not stem from an abstract and fixed correspondence between symbols and things in the world, but from the way human beings interact with the world. Because human beings have dynamic patterns of interaction with the physical world through spatial orientation, manipulation of objects, and motor programming, which stems from the way we are physically shaped. For example, our seeing equipment is in front part of our head. This fact is related to the way we move forward. And this physical fact has proved to be influential in the way we cognitively construct the world around us. These patterns structure and constrain how we construct meaning. Besides, in this part, we will also discuss about the approaches of categorization, different views which focuses on concepts. Conceptualization can be seen as an essential survival element that characterizes the human species. The conceptualization that language allows has been essential for us to survive and dominate others. For example, if someone hears beware of snake in the trail, the understanding of the concept snake triggers the listeners to be aware of potential danger. This abstraction potential of concept helps us to navigate the otherwise chaotic surrounding world. And concepts are vital in functioning human cognition because it represents an articulation of events, entities, or situations. Concepts are also linked together in a complex multi-dimensional network as follows. For example, in the concept of horse, then the complex multi-dimensional or animal, riding, stable, co, and so on. Next, we will deal about the approaches of categorization, different views, focusing on the nature of concept. Concepts are used to categorize experience, and they give access to knowledge concerning entities which fall into categories. And there are two main ways in which concept is described, namely classical approach and standard prototype approach. Okay, we will begin with the classical approach one. It deals with describing word meaning as a set of critical properties or features. And categories have clear boundaries, and within the category, all members have equal status. However, there are important limitations and problems in this approach. Wittgenstein's famous example of the concept of game I'm sorry for the pronunciation. He argued that it is impossible to draw up a list of features possessed by all games which jointly distinguish games from non-games. Yeah, and then for example here, the classifications are involves winning and losing, involves more than one person, has arbitrary rules done purely for enjoyment. It is impossible to characterize all games since there are activities we call games which do not satisfy these features. Next, we will discuss about the standard prototype approach. Here, Rose's main contribution to this part is to argue that natural conceptual categories are structured around the best example or prototypes of the category. So for example, if the concept is furniture, then the categories are chair, table, something like that. And his most basic experiment is asking subject to give a numerical value to their estimate of how good an example is of a given category. It is known as goodness of exemplar, or GEO. It consists of number 1, very good example, number 2, good example, number 3, fairly good example, number 4, moderately good example, number 5, fairly poor example, 6, bad example, and 7, very bad example. However, rating GEO is culturally dependent. It means that the prototypical fruit in British context is not the same in a Muslim culture. Next, we know that prototype also have effects. Crush, states that the existence of GEO, well actually it's supposed to be GEO, scores may not be particularly relevant, but prototypically as measured by GEO scores correlates with important aspects of cognitive behavior, which are the first one, mentions of order of mention, it is when subjects are asked to list members of a category, and especially if they are put under time pressure, the order of listing correlates with GOE ratings, with the prototypical members showing a strong tendency to appear early in the list. And then overall frequency, the overall frequency of mention in this list also correlates with GOE scores. And then order of acquisition, prototypically members of categories tend to be acquired first, and order of acquisition correlates with GOE scores. This fact is also related to the following, which is vocabulary learning. Children at later stages of language acquisition, when vocabulary enlargement can be greatly influenced by explicit teaching, learn new words faster if they are provided with definitions that focus on prototypical instantiations that if they are given an abstract definition that more accurately reflects the word's meaning. And then for speed of verification, in psycholinguistics, experiments in which subjects are asked to respond as quickly as they can in a categorization task, subjects produce faster responses if the task involve a prototypical member. And the last, fuzzy boundaries. Within prototype theory, it is usually held that only the prototype has 100% membership of a category, the degree of membership of other items being dependent on their degree of resemblance to the prototype. This is turned in reflected by their GOE score. That's the prototype effects. And then about the mental representation of categories. It refers to feature-based treatment of prototype structure, where categories with a prototype structure are represented by a set of features. However, it doesn't constitute a set of necessary and sufficient criteria. For example, in the category of vehicle, it is illustrated in the features of design to go on roads, had its own propulsive power, can go faster, faster than an ideal human, and so on. So the vehicle is the representation, and then the other are the features or the categories. After about the mental representation, we also deal with basic level categories. So here the following examples show the different categories of entities. So for example, about the concept is vehicle, and then the category is car, and for hatchback, and then the concept is fruit, and then the category is apple, Granny Smith, a living thing, creature, animal, cat, and man cat. Besides, in the basic level categories, there are also various characteristics of basic level. For example, behavioral interaction. You cannot mimic an animal unless you are told which animal to mimic. So here, related to the previous slide here, you cannot mimic a cat if you do not told the specific animal. So here, the cat, and then you can mimic the cat. And then the second character is that clear visual image. You cannot visualize an item of fruit if you are not told the specific type. So for example here, if you just being asked to visualize the fruit, then you will be confused because you don't have any idea what kind of fruit you have to imagine or visualize. So here, if you are being told to visualize apple, then you are knowing the idea that, oh yeah, that's apple. Okay. And then the next is neutral, a real name of the everyday reference. And the last is distinctness and informative characteristics. After basic level categories, we discuss about the concept of frames. That concept cannot be treated in isolation because every concept is embedded in a larger body of knowledge. For example, in understanding the concept of menu, whose basic meaning is a printed list of food items, requires some understanding of a scene in a restaurant or cafe, the idea of customer, waiter, or meals. And concept only makes sense when viewed against the background of certain domains which are usually more general or inclusive nature. For example, how the concept of finger is separated from the concept of hand, even they are dependent on one another. After that, oh yeah, because in Rambaud's book, it doesn't really discuss a lot about the example on how cognitive semantics work in an object of the study. So I provide you an article, a journal article, which basically discuss about the cognitive semantic approach. The title of the study is The Lexicon of Animal Classification in Japanese, a Cognitive Semantic Approach, and it is published in International Journal of Humanities Studies, which is written by Danang Satrianugraha. In this discussion, I only take the analysis part of the study. So the study aims to describe the lexicons of animal classification in Japanese, and the classification refers to a categorization system based on the semantic aspect of naming constructions. So we also learned about the classification in my previous slide, right here. Okay, in general, the lexicon in animal classification can be divided into 5 classifications, namely ingon-ingonan, alasan, satuan, buron, and pangirit. To make it easier, I provide you the table here. So here, the classification for ingon-ingonan, the semantic features are plus useful, plus productive, and minus wild. And for the example of lexicons are sapi, mendo, pepe. So sapi, mendo, pepe are the lexicons for the classification of ingon-ingonan. So ingon-ingonan is usually the concept, and then the lexicons are the categories, right? Well, here, I'm not sure whether semantic features are included into the discussion of cognitive semantics because if I'm not mistaken, it is related also to the traditional semantic, which is particularly on the componential analysis. Okay, so the other classification is alasan. The semantic features are minus useful, minus productive, and plus wild. And the example of lexicons are macan, kidang, ulo. And then the other classification is satuan, which have semantic features minus useful, minus productive, plus wild, plus destructive. And example of lexicons are celeng, tikus, and bajing, and so on. Here, so yeah, that's it. I think that's all for me. Thank you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. No, I'm kidding. So if you want to have the the detailed discussion of the journal, then I probably will send it to the group, right? Okay, I'll see you next week. Stay safe, stay healthy, everyone.